I got to tell you something, man. I'm really happy for the Pac-12 having a team like Colorado in its conference, because with all the attention that Deion Sanders has brought back to the program, the prestige, you saw the spring game, the buzz, the discussion, other coaches and other conferences are talking about it. It's about time the Pac-12 caught themselves a break, with UCLA and USC leaving. At least
they caught a break.
Yeah, at least Colorado's in the conference and bringing back some buzz to the conference, who should be announcing what time is it? Their media rights deal sometime in the near future. Well, was that last week or the week before? But nonetheless, never mind. Reports are saying Colorado's going to be on their way to the Big 12 instead. Okay. Just was curious how that happened and how that sort of panned out for the entire conference as a whole. The reports out there is that Colorado's going to receive a little over $31 million when they enter the Big 12, which is reportedly going to take place next season, so obviously not this season. And if these reports are true...
So they're all leaving together.
Yes. And if these reports are true, that Colorado will give the Pac-12 at least 1 year, and then they'll be on their way back to the Big 12, where they probably never should have left to begin with. So... have fun with that. What's the buzz there in Indianapolis at Big Ten Media Days, Brady Quinn?
Yeah, so obviously this came out last night. Now, some of us, especially being at the Pac-12 Media Days, kind of got wind of this last week. And the thought is it makes more geographical sense. I mean, there's a thought with some Colorado purists that they never should have left the Big 12 or even back when it was the Big 8 in the first place. That at that point in time, they felt like that was what was in the best interest of Colorado, but some would define it as a mistake. And so this now gets Colorado back into a conference they're familiar with. I think they're hoping to have a greater ground and an ability to recruit the state of Texas. And lastly, it's more money. I mean, that's the reality of it. Is we can talk about the Pac-12 media rights deal that you just joked about. The truth of the matter is, we don't know what they're going to sign for, but I'd have to imagine it's less than the number that Colorado's going to get for moving to the Big 12.
And it's going to be less money for the Pac now that there's another team leaving. It's got to be less financial leverage more and more for the Pac. I mean, is there any other way to look at the Pac-12 other than doomed? Like, I think that's it. It's a wrap. It was already. I felt like the moment they lost UCLA and USC to the Big Ten, that it was already like the day of reckoning was already on its way. I mean, what else is left? Oh, another team leaves, goes to another conference. I think there's going to be other teams. You don't think Oregon is maybe entertaining it?
Well,
going somewhere else?
The truth of the matter is, I think everyone probably looks at their options and entertains it. It's a byproduct of the economics. Okay, the TV rights media deals are largely what drives this. But what you have to ask yourself, if you're a conference or if you're one of those TV networks, why would you want to pay more for a brand that you might already have the rights to? Right? And if you're one of those schools in the conference, why would you want to bring in another brand that's going to take away from your piece of the pie, unless one of two things? They're going to help elevate that conference because they're going to bring in more viewership, or they're going to take less to come in, right? They might take a half rights fee as opposed to 100%. So round numbers, right? If you're getting $60 million a year, maybe you'd rather take 30. And the problem with that is it directly correlates to the fact that they're obviously not getting that much money somewhere else. And if they're willing to take a half rights fee for, whatever period of time before they become a full member, they're sitting there and telling you, we're willing to take the $30 million on the table that this conference is offering us, as opposed to whatever your media rights deal may be. So I think there's a lot of thoughts, Oregon and Washington, some of these other schools in the Pac-12. Arizona's one that I would keep an eye on. These are institutions and schools that are looking for safe harbor. Like, everyone's looking at the future of their program and how this is going to shake out. And I think somewhere in the back of their minds, they're looking at the economics of it and they're saying, if we can't make enough money to be able to fund our athletics program and do so competitively, we have to look somewhere else. And that's essentially what the Big 12 has offered Colorado, and that's what they're going to potentially offer another team, because you can't think it's only going to be one. They have an odd number of teams once Colorado enters. So you'd have to bring in someone else. And so I'd keep an eye on, another Pac-12 school joining them, whoever that may be for the Big 12.
It just goes to
What's the highest number? What's the highest number it could be from the Pac-12? Could it be Arizona, Arizona State, and Oregon? Could it be one of those other teams like a Utah or a Washington? Like, what's the number? Because it seems like everybody is pillaging the Pac.
Right, and it's tough to know what that number is, because we don't necessarily know if there's going to be potentially any other movement in any of the other conferences to the Big Ten or the SEC. There's always those rumors and things floating around about Florida State or Miami or Clemson out of the ACC would want to move to the SEC. But again, if you're ESPN or Disney in this case, who holds the rights to both conferences, why would you want to pay more for a team you already have the rights to? So the TV network's not behind it. They're not pushing it. The other schools in the SEC, if you're Mississippi State, you don't want Clemson or someone else coming into the SEC and taking up part of your piece of the pie, and then all of a sudden knocking you down. I mean, you're already trying to struggle to compete anyway. So why would you want that? And so the idea that this expansion is going to continue, I don't know that I see it expanding as big and as fast as a lot of people think. Now, if the Pac-12 just completely fell apart, that'd be one thing. But I think they will be able to negotiate a media rights deal. And the schools are going to have to make the decision on what they want to do. And these other conferences, they might say, yeah, we're willing to take an Oregon or Washington if they're going to take, a 50% rights fee. So it all comes down to the economics of it and how they can make it work. But the idea that this expansion is going to be so many teams, you can only make it feasible for X number of teams, unless you're willing to get more money for the media rights. And I don't necessarily know that that's going to be the case, but maybe it is the Big 12 that wants to have the biggest conference, and maybe that's their plan. And they say, hey, look, if you're in the Big 10 or SEC, ACC, or Pac-12, you come play us. Like, we're going to be everyone's non-conference game, basically, because we have all the other teams that are in the Power 5, and then we've got a competitive conference, playing amongst each other. That might be the plan that they think is best moving forward. But that doesn't mean that the Big Ten and SEC are going to follow suit with that.
Outside of the economics of it all, if you just looked at the optics, it's just another blow and another slight against the Pac-12. And you guys have obviously played football in every, I would assume in a lot of different conferences. You've played all over the country. You've seen it or coached or been around it or covered it or called games or whatever. It's just becoming more obvious over the past 5-6 years, and Petros is coming on next hour, and he's been talking about this as well. It's just become more obvious that there's clearly an order of importance on football and athletics in certain conferences, and the Pac-12 is clearly dead last amongst the Power Fives. And I don't even know if it's close.
There's a lot of reasons why, though. I mean, if you look at the Pac-12 schools, they tend to have more Olympic sports, more sports in general, which makes it harder to put as many resources into football, for example, as a school in the SEC. So that's one thing they kind of have going against them that hurts them. The leadership of Larry Scott was awful as a commissioner. And I know Larry. I obviously would run into him often working. He's a nice man. He did not do a good job in foreseeing the future and figuring out distribution of the Pac-12 and understanding the landscape of where everything was going. So he put them behind the eight ball. So you can't talk about what's happening without talking about the economics, because that's why they've gotten to this point. I will say this, I don't ever get the sense that the culture on the West Coast, takes into account football as much as it does in the Midwest, in the South, in the state of Texas, however you want to define them geographically. When I look at and go to those campuses and see people out tailgating at 7 a.m., I don't see that. Granted, when we're out in the West Coast, those games aren't as early, but you don't see that type of crowd. You don't see that type of, desire for it. I mean, even high school games. And LaVar, I know you go out there and coach, but you go back to my high school time in Ohio, you get 10,000 every single game. And that's one of three public schools in my district.
The Trinity League, there's one league that's like that, and that's the Trinity League. You get that type of participation, but I get what you're saying 100%.
And this isn't a knock on the athletes out there. Like, I think that's the hard thing about this is the Pac-12 has the most parity, in my opinion, of any of the Power 5 conferences this year. They've got unbelievable quarterback play. They've got great coaches. They have unbelievable teams. I think top to bottom, you'd say like I'm not even sure. Maybe you'd say, Washington State might be, towards the bottom or whoever you want to throw in that kind. Maybe Arizona. Go look at Jaden DeLoria and some of the plays he had last year and Jed Fish and what he's building in Tucson. Go look up at Washington State at Cam Ward, who's an absolute stud at quarterback for them. And I think it doesn't matter who you're talking about in the Pac-12. They have as I guess high of a floor as anyone in college football as far as the teams, and they beat up on each other. And it's actually been to their own demise because they haven't been a part of the college football playoff. But I mean, as far as like the stadiums and filling them out and all that, you see it from time to time, but it's not quite the same as the feel that you get when you go to some other campuses.
It's not the same environment, 100%. For the college level, it's not the same. I mean, the intensity of and just the feel of what the game presents, game day experience presents, it's definitely different. On the West Coast, it's more laid back.
If you go to some of those other regions in the country, there's almost like I don't want to say live or die with this game or with this team, but there's just a feeling of this is important and this impacts us if our team loses. And that creates an anxiety and an intensity in those stadiums that you can't really match. And you come out to a Pac-12 game and it's like, well, we'll go to In-N-Out afterwards. Like it's just it's just not the same. Like there's no buzz to it. So
I mean, I can promise you this from growing up in Columbus, Ohio. The way they feel about Michigan after, and people tend to forget this, Michigan's beat in the last 2 years. They didn't play during the COVID year. So it's been 4 years since Ohio State has known success versus Michigan.
That's right.
And you better believe every single Michigan alum, Michigan fan lets them know about it. Like you cross that state line and you go up north and you're going on a nice little vacation up in one of those beautiful lakes they've got in Michigan and you get an Ohio plate, they're going to let you know. It's just, I'm telling you, it's a different way of life when it comes to football and how it's ingrained into the culture, into the society of a lot of those towns, communities, and cities.
Yeah, it's and by the way, the odds for the Big Ten championship right now dead even. Michigan and Ohio State both plus 165 according to our friends at DraftKings to win the conference.
And I'll tell you this much:
may have something
you know what?
to do
And
with
tell me what Penn State's at, because go put some money on Penn State
6-1.
Because that's a team
I'm telling you.
There's some value there, man. That's a good football team.
Listen, I've got enough people. I've got enough people inside the Big Ten conference and people in and around that cover the sport and cover those teams involved, and they're telling me that Penn State is staring 3 losses square in the eyes. And again, that's on good authority. From
3.
People
what are the 3?
3 losses. Listen,
what are
he's
they?
Clearly saying Michigan, Ohio State, and who's the other one?
Right.
I mean, Illinois. I mean, of course. Like, what would you?
I mean, we'll be there. Week 3, big noon kickoff. We'll be there for that one.
I mean, you saw what happened at the goal line for those 2-point conversions a couple years ago.
That was not last year.
Yeah, but it was a couple years ago. But there's still remnants of that in the minds of people there.
Yeah, there's no real remnants.
I think Jonas had a bet that might have come back to get him there.
How'd you know? By the way,
I mean, look, they do get Iowa. They host them for the whiteout, right? That's the whiteout game this year, which should be awesome. And then they do have to go to Sparty. They have to go to East Lansing. And that's actually, excuse me, that's at Ford Field.
They're not
that's
playing in
a neutral
Lansing.
site.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's Ford Field. So
Prime
that
time.
could be a, who knows?
Yeah, it's going to be difficult, man. I don't know.
We got to get Michigan and Ohio State. We got to get one of them. And
That's honestly been, you need to
game.
get both, because that's been James's Achilles heel, since he's been there.
Yeah.
And I would also say watch out for Delaware week 2 if I'm Penn State.
Yeah, you got to watch out for Delaware.
Yeah, feels like
Number
some.
10.
You know what you should watch?
What's that?
When Delaware comes in town?
What's that?
You should watch both Arringtons.
Yeah, damn right you should.
VAR
Yeah.
and Little VAR.
Yeah.
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 The real Stick City. I'm talking
That's right.
about.